So this weekend is set championships, and for us here, we like to kind of utilize this time to discuss different decks, like within the Metafy and within the different supporters of Metafy. So I asked this morning, hey, what deck are you playing this weekend? What deck are you planning to play in set championships? I'm going to take a look at the different decks here, and yeah, these are not all meta decks by any which means. So, it's this nice little fun kind of, I guess, conversation for me to have, basically looking at this type of stuff and seeing, what is the plan for a certain player in the Discord, what is their motive behind a particular deck and things like that. So with that, we're going to get into it. We're going to start looking at these decks, and we're going to have this out there for everybody for Metafy for week one. And then this is actually going to come out on YouTube probably like a week or two late, but kind of just showcasing like, hey, if you were part of the Metafy, if you were signed up in the Climber tier, these are the kind of interactions that you get to have with TFM. First comes first, we have a Ruby Steel mid-range deck. Shout out to Smurf, per usual, Minnesota native. And in all honesty, this deck is, well, it's different, right? Ruby Steel was a deck that actually did have a registered tournament in EUCC. I don't think we ever were able to actually see that deck, though. So we can't really compare as to what it looked like. What I can say about this particular list is that it's a dock deck, which I can get behind. I am a dock enthusiast, of course. Aside from that, there's some things I really like about this deck, and then there's some things that I don't necessarily understand. Clearly, what we're trying to do is get the most out of our characters and trying our best to keep them hardy. I like the idea of the sneak Floodborn Aladdin here for Ruby with the 1-cost 1/3, which means there is a world where you can sneak this card into play on turn 4 along with the Jong Silver or along with the Pete. Ideally, Pete would be potentially the best option. Therefore, you can protect your Aladdin and your Pete from impending doom. I also don't expect your opponent to ever consider the Shift 5 with Aladdin. So that's a big deal as well, is that they just play into it. And you just get to gain 2 lore and take 2 lore from them. It's a pretty big deal. In any world where you set this up on a later turn and Raya is already in the play, you can start talking about some really big swing turns with Shift Aladdin, which I think is very interesting. The one card that does look kind of out of place in a way here is the Tinkerbells. While I do agree the Tinkerbell is a great card, I just think in the current metagame, in a deck that doesn't have ramp or a shift target, I don't know if I want to rely on a 6-cost Tinkerbell. While she is great and she can hit play and do awesome things, it's not like she's that demanding in a board with an evasive metagame. So therefore, I'm not too crazy about her. Obviously, the idea that this deck's only draw power is Doc and is Beast, and Doc having 4 uninkable Jim Hawkins, 4 Beast, 4 Tinkerbell, 3 Aladdins, and then along came Zeus, is a lot of high-end uninkables. So if you draw the wrong starting hand, your Doc is just going to be terrible, if I'm going to be honest with you. So having him as a reliable draw with such a top end is another really good reason why I would get rid of Tinkerbell. It's also another reason why I would probably go down on Jim Hawkins. The other option here is to just lean in and get rid of Tinkerbells, lower some of the numbers, but then just play Robin Hood with Robin Hood shift, and then just play a whole new world. I know that Smurf has done this in the past, but to me, with this particular list, only having Doc and then having all this top end doesn't really feel good. I think you're going to end up having hands that are just awful for you, which just feels terrible. Whereas at least if you just lean into a whole new world lines, you can still play big characters like Jim Hawkins and big characters like Robin Hoods, and they're kind of just also annoying characters. I mean, hey, Jim Hawkins as a 5/5 is annoying. Robin Hood as a 3/6 is annoying. And if you can shift them and kind of get away with that, I think that could just be an overall better position. Imperial Bow is a great card. I don't feel like necessarily going through and checking the hero count here. Obviously, making Aladdin have evasive is pretty awesome. Being able to take out an Elsa or a Genie, gain the 2 lore, take the 2 lore is pretty big. So I definitely see some great things there. But all in all, I think that this list is very off the wall. It's very draw dependent. It's going to really be mulligan dependent, and I think that you're gonna very easily come out with hands that are just unplayable, and that's gonna suck for you. So yeah, I don't know. Like for Smurf, it's right up his alley, but this is not a list that I would really I would tell anyone to say, hey, yeah, go play this unless you know really want to challenge yourself in a tournament. So Vince here giving us the Ruby Sapphire, more I would say like the better mirror version of this deck. Uh, Understanding that McDuck's Manor on 3 on the play in the mirror is like insane. You just get to tell your opponent like, hey, I'm gonna gain 8 or 10 lore from my 3 cost, like from my 4 cost card on turn 3, which is great. I would not play Dig a Little Deeper. Sorry, DKP wasn't right, still isn't right, and I would definitely not play that card. I think that just the 8 cost Uninkable is not worth it. Specifically in a world without Fishbone Quill, you're just way too reliant on eventually having to play it. And honestly, like singing it is, it's not unrealistic, but it's also not like there. So if I was looking to cut a card, I certainly would cut Dig a Little Deeper and just play like anything. The third Sisu seems great. I'd much rather have more Sisus, more Be Prepareds into a general setting in set champs. A lot of the decks that we had seen for NACC that were successful were very targeted, where in Continentals or like in set championships, you know, you're going to play against literally everything. You're going to play against the Ruby Steel deck that we just showed and things like that. So you have to be able to plan for everything. So because of that, I like having more board wipes and set champs. I think it just gives you more options and more outs to like matchups that you're not expecting. It just gives you more outs to like players that aren't as good as you. A lot of times people like just won't play around Sisu correctly, or they won't play around Be Prepared correctly. So I would just rather have more of them rather than a card like Dig a Little Deeper to go and find them. Just not a big fan of that card in general, because if you aren't singing it and you're ever paying 8, it feels terrible. I just like wouldn't do it. Aside from that, you know, everything else in this list is fine. I'm not crazy about Develop Your Brain. I get it. You know, we want to have things to do with our extra resource after sale, but like, in all honesty, I just think that you could just be doing other stuff with it. Just, I don't know, like just fill the role everywhere else. Play the 4th Maleficent, you know, like play another more impactful action, in all honesty. I don't know what the uninkable count is here, but, you know, even playing some number of ice blocks, I don't think is the end of the world. You could also make room for Prince John. Prince John has been massive in our testing for Blue Red. It's a card that I would really recommend all Blue Red players to check out. I think it is that good. So like that's definitely a room that I would kind of look into and just put that dude in play and say, and honestly be impressed by him. I think that's the biggest thing is it's a card that many have looked at and not played with and be like, oh, it's mediocre. Oh, it dies the genie, you know, or it dies to like Elsa. Like even if that's the play line that they go with, it means that like they're taking a turn off from gaining lore with their genie and with their Elsa and things like that, or whatever else they're going to use to pick off your Prince John. And that's a big deal for you to get to cards like Sisu and to get to cards like Be Prepared, because when they don't Elsa, then he all of a sudden represents, you know, more Vital Spears, more Popsicles. Another card that really, really was good was Poison Apple. That's a card that, like, with 4 Maui Sharks, I would certainly be putting at least 1 Poison Apple here. That could even be what the Uninkable turns into from Dig a Little Deeper. Just getting that card into play and repeating it with Prince John will win you a ton of games. So, like, that's definitely, if you want to go this more burn route and play Goofies and play make Ducks Manners and 4 Sharks, like, that's all fine. But I would still think that Prince John and Poison Apple will make this version of this deck better. Oh, my good friend AJ. So AJ's been playing Baja Blast. He was actually the most excited person to find out that we had built a Baja Blast list that we've been testing, you know, leading up to NACC. I wish I had found the deck a week earlier. You know, Colby did most of the video, but the truth is about this deck is that when I found it, I was so excited. And when we started talking about it, I got more excited. When Colby reported on it for the first time and said, okay, this deck might be real, I got super excited. And then I chickened out on Friday. In all honesty, if we had this deck a week earlier, you know, and if I really gave it like an ounce of effort, and wasn't so committed to Amethyst Steel, I think I would have played this deck in LCQ. I think that this deck is that real. However, there's a bunch of cards here that when we were testing it, I wasn't a fan of. John Silver's, like, Emerald John Silver is not a card that I'm a fan of. I think that its ability is super meh. It costs too much for its stat line, so it just feels like also super meh. I just didn't really like what it was doing at all. So I would remove that. Baymax is interesting. I don't hate it at all. It's a card that we thought about playing because it does feel that like 5 curve. But I think Baymax is specifically good with Scrooge McDuck. So if you don't have Scrooge McDuck, I don't like Baymax as much because I love the idea of, you know, turn 2 Tipo or turn 2 Sail into Scrooge McDuck into Baymax. I think that those are very powerful lines because it just means your Scrooge McDuck is going to gain you even more lore. And it's also just saying, like, I'm going to have some big fat fatties in play. What I like about this deck the most is the stat lines. You know, like 2-4 with Ward. How do you get rid of that card? You know, 2-6. The willpower is ridiculous. 4-6, 5-6, 4-6. Like, the stat lines on all these cards are, like, so annoying for opponents to deal with. And in most cases, they need double Ice Block or an Ice Block plus Medusa. Like, they need really specific lines to kind of feel ahead. Otherwise, they're running multiple things into your characters, and I think that's a really big deal. I think for set championships in general, if you really want to explore, this is the type of deck that people just will not have a goddamn clue what you're doing. There is no publicity on this deck aside from the one video that was made on the channel about it, but realistically, like, there's no results on ink decks. So, like, your normal players that just go on and look at ink decks for the guys that won, they are going to play all the decks from NACC. Well, guess what? This deck is very well positioned into all those decks from NACC. If this deck had been in NACC, there is a good chance that with the right pairings, it would have been a top 16 deck. I really do feel that strongly about this list to this point after 2 weeks of testing it now. I think it is that good, but it is difficult to play. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's like some easy deck to play. Unlike Aggro Doc, you know, where I feel like Aggro Doc is a deck that everyone can pick up and everyone can kind of play and everyone can kind of be successful with it enough. There's a lot of decision points with this deck, so it's definitely not as easy. But hey, if you're a Sapphire player, if you like to ramp on turn 2, just, you know, if you got these cards, give it a go. When's the last time you played cards like Clarabelle? You know, when have you ever thought about playing Peter Pan? Colby touched on this a little bit, but like in the event, I literally won a game with my opponent on 19. He had Goat, Diablo in play. And I removed both of the Goats and the Diablo, and I won the game on my next turn. He never gained another lore. This deck is powerful. Peter Pan is insane. You really have an edge because your opponents just don't know what you're doing. You're almost always going to get at least one free win in the event because, like, in every match, your opponent is just trying to figure out what the hell you're doing. And on top of that, you might win one game with just value from Clarabelle, and then you might win another game because of Ben Might Will. So it really is like focusing on something new and something powerful and strong, and I really do enjoy that. It's definitely a list that I'm going to keep tinkering with. I'm probably going to play it this weekend for sure, unless I get convinced to do something else, but realistically, it's likely going to be Baja Blast. Amethyst Steel Jafar. Listen, I'm on team. You can probably play any version of Amethyst Steel to success. And in all honesty, like, why not Jafar? I do think that Jafar is a deck that you can certainly get away with right now. You know, there are only very specific answers to both the 2-cost and the 4-cost Jafars. And if you just look like a disguised Amethyst Steel deck early on, your opponent might not have the opportunity to interact with you. So while I'm not crazy about it, while I don't think this is the best Amethyst Steel deck, I do think that if you want to have a little fun, you know, 1 week of your set championship, if you're an Amethyst Steel player and you show up week 1, you know, with your normal Amethyst Steel mid-range, you show up week 2 with like an Amethyst Steel Doc, and all your opponents are thinking like, oh yeah, they're this deck. And then in week 3 you go, you know what, I'm going to Jafar you. I think you can get away with it. I'm just being real. So I think this is a fine list. I'm sure there's a way to make this list better. There are versions of it that we've covered on the meta reports and things like that. There's also a couple of these floating around on ink deck, so, you know, pick your poison. But in the end, if this is what you want to do, I think you can do it for at least 1 week in set championships. I think this is viable. Let's talk about the deck that I would not play. Yeah, for me, I'm completely out on Emerald Amethyst. I'm sorry. I don't even care that it was in the top 8 of Nationals. This deck's matchups are like Ruby Sapphire or bust, in my humble opinion. It has zero matchup in the steel decks unless you are an actual master at the deck, and I don't even think it's worth being a master at this deck. That's my humble opinion of it. Like, yeah, you look at these cards and you're like, okay, cool. I have 4 Cursed Merfolks, great. I have 4 Go-Go, sure, that's a respectable card. 4 Ursula Deceiver, like, she's not even that good anymore. 4 Kits is okay, but in all honesty, like, Muses is just better than this on average, and there's better Emerald decks that can utilize these cards a little bit better, and Cricky is just like whatever. So when you even look at this list, you're just playing a purple deck, and you're probably playing the 4th best purple deck. Ruby is better, Sapphire is better, Steel is certainly better. Just I wouldn't play this deck. In all honesty, I just wouldn't. I would not sleeve up this deck at all. I think it's way too big of a liability unless you're like, yeah, I'm going to go to a set championship, so I'm going to play against 5 Ruby Sapphire decks, and I'm going to win all 5 of those matchups. Great. If you don't, and you see, like, any Amber Steel, you're like, shit, I'm in trouble. If you see any Sapphire Steel, shit, I'm in trouble. If you see any Amethyst Steel, you're like, shit, I'm in trouble. Honestly, if you see good Ruby Amethyst players, you're in trouble. If you see good Ruby Sapphire players, you're in trouble. Like, this deck is only good at beating bad Ruby Sapphire players. It's not even like that's it. Like it really isn't that good. The moment that they realize the only way you can win is because of Go-Go, they just change their plan and they can beat you without ever having to turn a card sideways until they win the game because you have no way to prevent them from doing so. So yeah. With all that, I wouldn't play this deck. That's just me. Last but certainly not least, shout out to Jorge here. Really, I felt really bad. We actually recorded our coaching session going into LCQ, and I was stupid and deleted it because I was cleaning out my hard drive, and I didn't realize that it was in a different place than I thought it was, and because of that, it got deleted, and I was really bummed. That's life. We move on. Yada yada. But this list is comic relief because he is adjusting to a metagame that will have a uptick in Baja Blast decks because the Puerto Ricans came out to play and they really thought the Baja Blast deck was interesting. They did build their own little version of it. They had locations, they had items, so it's definitely very different. I'd probably say like 12 to 15 cards different than the list that we were working on, but it's still like another version of it and still understanding of that. So like going in, playing 4 Pete's, playing 4 Lawrence, like these are cards that are very good against that deck. Just having more 3/3s in general are very good. The one argument I would go to again here is just like not playing White Roses and playing John Silver. I think that's a big deal. John Silver coming in, and even in a world where we're worried about Baja Blast, like turning off a Grandma Tala, turning off a Scrooge McDuck and things like that is a big deal on a 3/3 body that has a lore. I think you're going to get more out of that card. White Roses was just a card that I think over the last 6 weeks I have fell out of favor with. I've just fell out of love with it. I think that a lot of the times we're like, oh yeah, that lore is so good, it's so great. But in all honesty, what John Silver can gain you is so much more than one lore. And that's the big deal, is like, I think that you can just do better with your 3-drops, and therefore I would try and do better with my 3-drops. The idea that there are no else's in this list is crazy. The same thing can be said about no Genie. Also crazy. I don't know if I live that life, honestly. Like, I still think Genie is really, really good. I still think Elsa is really, really good. I feel like you're making a big sacrifice, specifically in a world with a card like don't play Argus. Argus is terrible. Like, that's just a bad decision. Card is not good. Do not play it. Anything else, and I mean that. Like, anything else. That card's terrible. Don't play that. So I would still play Genie. I would still play Elsa. I would still make room for those cards. But aside from that, the list is fine. The list is straightforward. I'd still play Diablo too. But, if we're going to make all these dramatic changes, for the very least, do not play Argus. The card's trash. Just so bad. Besides that, if this is the world you want to live in, that's fine. I thought this was a Chernobog up here. It is Diablo. I think that having more one drops is still kind of important just to get early pressure, just to have early things to utilize with Fox and Crabs and things like that, so which I still like having a little bit more one drops. But aside from that, I think it is a dramatic change to kind of deal with a deck that might not be a worry for everyone. So I keep saying that Amethyst Steel, you can kind of like play like any 80 cards and it be good, and I still kind of believe that, but you know, such is life. And last but not least, we actually have Racers. This is the newest list that Colby is working on, and you know, it is a Sugar Ray Speedway deck list. And Rapunzel's Tower came out in the top 16 Amber Steel deck for the Mines version of it. This was a card that Kurt was playing, and it was probably ink like 90% of the time. That would be my guess. But the 10% of the time it wasn't. It was a game changer, and I think it made a big difference for cards like Rapunzel and for cards like Daisy and like even Lilo and stuff like that. Having the ability to bring back Lilo later on and then attach it and give it more health makes it a little bit more annoying to get rid of, specifically, you know, on an 8 willpower location. So that's a nice little line to set up later in the game to kind of close games out. Obviously, Neverland is just a 4 willpower thing that we're utilizing to have another location to move to our Sugar Ray Speedway. The Mulan shift is very interesting. I'm not certain how good this is. This is another testing theory. This is what Colby's good at. He's very good at just like trying random crap. But, you know, having Moana into Flynn, into Sisu, pretty great. Having the repeatability with Minnie Mouse to kind of get stuff back is pretty great. I don't love Maximus. I'm never going to love Maximus. I feel like this could probably be a different card, but hey, you know, here we are. We're trying some stuff out, so like we'll find out, you know, soon enough if this card is good enough. Obviously, this deck is a Rapunzel deck by nature, and if we can get Sugar Ray Speedway to work, it'll be great for it. But all in all, it's a new testing theory. If you're really looking to do something different this weekend, I think racing is a cool idea, cool concept. So it's definitely something worth checking out. But all in all, you know, that's just kind of it. Kind of the decks that were submitted this morning. So shout out to everyone that did submit early and things like that. But in the end, like, listen, I still think that Amber Steel aggro is a good deck. I think Amber Steel Songs is a good deck. I still think Ruby Sapphire is great. Ruby Amethyst just won NACC. Would I play Ed's version? No, I wouldn't. Ed himself has said, hey, this is only good because I wanted to beat Red Blue. And guess what? He beat up on Red Blue. So, like, you know, I would look at it that way. But safety picks is I think, the key to it. At the end of the day, what everyone should have learned from NACC is that the metagame is diverse. And the top 16 showcased that. The top 4 were 4 different decks. The top 8, I think, were 8 different decks, maybe, or 6 different decks. I think there was 2 blue-red decks, and then everything else was different, I believe, if I remember correctly. So that's just telling you that, hey, playing to your comfort is the right way to go. That's exactly what you should be doing. You should just be saying, hey, I've been playing with this deck for the last week, and I think it's good. I think that I can be successful with it, and I understand my matchups. I think you should be doing that. You know, if you like Amethyst Steel midrange, play Amethyst Steel midrange. If you like Amber Steel aggro, play Amber Steel aggro. If you're a Ruby Amethyst player, play Ruby Amethyst. If you're Ruby Sapphire, just do it. You know, like, I don't think there's like any key here that's saying you should only play this. I don't think that's true. I think that you should still kind of just be excited to play Lorcana. Hopefully the tournaments are not, you know, 10 people and they're 20 people, 30 people, and you get to like enjoy it for a day. But I think the key takeaway is like, right now the metagame is diverse, and because of that, you are blessed. There is no ticket that says you have to play this card or you have to play this deck because it's the best. Because in all honesty, like, 6 decks are the best, and I think that that's good for Disney Lorcana, specifically around set championship season. I like the idea that over the next month, if I wanted to, I could probably play 6, 7, 8 different decks, and it would be fine. So that's where I'm at. That's my last tidbit to you is just, you know, go enjoy Lorcana. Good luck with your stitches. If you have any more and you want, comment on this video or on the Metafy that it's posted. This way we can help you and get a quick response to you and things like that. But all in all, if you haven't yet, definitely hit the like button on this for me. If this is out after the Metafy and everything like that, and you are seeing this to the public, like I said, a week or 2 late, thanks for checking out this and kind of our support to our Metafy climbers. Again, all of that link is in the description below. It's also in the pinned comments. get in the climb tier, get in the Discord, get a part of that conversation, get better at Disney Lorcana by utilizing a community that is trying to get better. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and we'll catch you in the next one.